let me pick your brain on what you like to talk about often on your channel and something that I still can't get my head wrapped around, Amit. And of course, I'm talking about Palantir. How's Palantir doing? Get our audiences caught up on this. Obviously, we know they posted their first profitable quarter ever or something in Q1, right?
Yep.
If I remember correctly. It's run up quite a bit. I'll pull up the chart here once I'll hand it over to you. But get the audience caught up on where the company's at, what's going on with that story, and then I'm gonna just ask you a few questions because to this day I still want to invest in Palantir, but I just simply still don't get it. So
Yeah.
help me out, my friend.
Yeah, that's fair.
Give us some ideas.
Yeah, that's very fair. I mean, look, a lot. I think Palantir is not a company for everyone to invest in. It is a company that I've been trying to understand for 2 years, and I think I finally understand it, at least to an extent. Here's the first thing I'll say about Palantir. The stock's up 137% on the year. It is down like 80. It was down 80% from the highs of 45 in 2021 when the world was going crazy, to about like below 590 was low. Now it's at $15. And the recent run up has primarily been because most investors on the institutional side, because I think the 100% run up in the past couple months is institutional. I don't think retail could do that with 2 billion shares outstanding, is primarily because investors think this is going to be a big AI play. The NASDAQ was down 35% peak to trough in February. And then ChatGPT went mainstream, got 100 million users in a couple of weeks. And that showcased to people that AI is going to be so deflationary, it's going to be like a different level of what we see just on like, forget the content side of it, of like, you can upload more content. It's more easier to edit all this stuff. Think about this in drug discovery, pharmaceuticals, supply chains, logistics, etc. So if investors are factoring in that AI is going to fundamentally re-architect the way in which businesses operate, then the question becomes, what are the players that are going to be able to enable businesses to have some type of AI strategy? And Palantir in April released a platform called AIP, which is their version of being essentially a digital twin for every organization in the world in every single industry, in order to help them be more optimized, efficient, able to make more revenue and reduce more costs. And that's why the market's gone kind of crazy. So there's a lot to dive into, like the nuances of it, but the overall story is AI is now the future. Palantir has always been an AI player, but now the market really cares about AI. That's why the stock has run up. And then in terms of understanding the company, the simple argument is that the world is creating more data. Data is the new oil. Companies need to be able to learn how to manage and process that data. And Palantir is one of the most effective tools in the market to be able to help companies manage their data. And if that is the case, then I think this could be a very big company over the next 2 years, 10 years.
Okay, great. So let me sort of try and summarize what I think Palantir is, and then you tell me how accurate I am. Okay. So and I'm going to try to make it as simplistic as possible to really get to the core of what Palantir does. So Palantir is a software suite that businesses and organizations can leverage to help them become way more efficient and way more effective. Is that a good summarization?
That is a perfect summarization outside of the 2 words you use, software suite. I would replace that with what the company says is they're an operating system. And I think that
Okay.
changes the dynamics a little bit, because software suite is more so like you just download the software, you plug it in, and then it goes. Palantir, before they work with a company, they consult with the company. So with BP, for example, they've had an exclusive contract with BP for a very long time. BP in their Q1 earnings just came out and said the cost of a barrel to drill oil was $14 in 2012. It has gone down to $6. So there's been an $8 reduction per barrel. You know, BP is doing hundreds of millions of barrels a day. That's a lot of money they've saved. It got to the point where BP even bought 1% of Palantir in 2021. They recently sold it off for $431 million because they were like, this software is just so amazing. Palantir it became an operating system for BP in which every department, accounting, finance, marketing, sales, logistics, the actual drilling folks, they use the software and then they build apps on top of that software within the internal structure of the organization, which made the product incredibly sticky and made the product incredibly effective in terms of actually streamlining the business's ability to use data to become more effective. And so if you think of it as an operating system, as a Windows or a Mac for an enterprise, then the sort of LTV of that enterprise becomes a lot more bigger.
Gotcha. So it's more like it's a foundation. It's a foundation software or operating system, like you said, that helps. It's basically you build your entire company on this foundation, and then that foundation has built-in tools and things that help you run that business significantly more efficiently or quicker or at lower costs than the alternatives. Correct? Is that a good way of
Correct.
thinking about it? Okay.
100%.
And
That's the
it's
best way.
and then all that operating system stuff is built with code, right? It's software. So somebody like the Palantir team, this is why what they're good at. They sit down to write the code so that this operating system exists for you to build your company on top of it. Is
Yep.
that correct?
I would agree.
In the age of AI, why couldn't an AI build a Palantir?
Yeah, it's a good question. And, I've spoken to some very technical people in the Palantir community, and they have come to some unique conclusions, which is that all software might be useless by 2030. Like the idea that you need software to do anything or you need programmers in and of itself, it's not like they're going away, but it's just not going to be as useful anymore. And so this brings up the question of large language models, right? Because essentially LLMs, if they're trained on proprietary data within an organization, they can do what a lot of the software was doing, which is not going to replace people. Those people are just going to be able to use the LLMs to become more effective. And that's why I think over the past 3 months, Palantir has run up so much, because Palantir recognized that what they're doing is going to become commoditized by AI eventually. I think every software company realized that. But Palantir actually took action around that. And so in April, when they launched AIP, which is their AI platform, essentially their argument to the market was, okay, we've been working on AI for 20 years. Now AI is taking over. We have a suite of software products that are these operating systems for enterprises, governments, et cetera, that are incredibly effective. And we know they work. We've been able to sell them. We did a $1.9 billion in revenue, et cetera. We know it's cool. Now, if the market's shifting to AI, how can we become the de facto AI operating system of an enterprise? And so with AIP, what they've essentially said is, if you want to implement any level of infrastructure in your enterprise to allow LLMs to be trained on the data so that you can leverage the LLMs, meaning, if you're Hyundai and you need to know how many parts you need to order for a certain a doorknob when you're building the cars, if you could ask an LLM a certain question and get an answer immediately, your efficiency just skyrockets. But in order to do that, the LLM has to be trained on company-specific data, which means that data has to be secure, it has to be protected, it has to be confidential, and it has to be built into an overall operating system that allows it to fetch those billions of data points in order to give you that answer in 2 seconds, which is what ChatGPT does. That's their new AIP platform. And their moat, which is why Bank of America just upgraded them from, I think, $13 to $18, even with their revenue growth not increasing. So Bank of America is like, we know your revenue growth has not changed, but we're still giving you a $10 billion market cap upgrade because we think it's going to go crazy if you get this right, which is they believe they have the most secure way to build AI infrastructure for companies. If you don't build it in a secure way and have the data leaking, if you're working with a hospital, like they're working with the Cleveland Clinic, and patient data leaks in some capacity, those LLMs become worthless because now you have patient data that's leaking. Like it's a non-starter. So the bull case for Palantir now over the next 10 years is if the AI enterprise software spend, I've seen many studies averaging from 2.7 trillion to 4.4 trillion in the total addressable market by 2033, is a real thing. And every company, every enterprise in the world needs to implement AI infrastructure safely and securely. If Palantir is the de facto solution, or even one of the 10 companies that's part of that discussion, it could be a good return.
Okay. So let me see if I can simplify it and say it back. So, and again, for those that are not familiar, LLM stands for large language model, which is basically a fancy word for what the AI system utilizes to spit out the answer, right? I mean, is that a good
Correct.
way of putting it? Yeah. And the reason why I'm doing this exercise is so what you're explaining is super easy to understand. It's just the way my brain works is I need to break it down to the simplest form and then have somebody tell me if that's correct, and then I can put that in a bank somewhere and then reference it back, because that's just to give people insight into how I think. So Palantir's moat for the next decade or so appears to be its ability to ensure that the data that a company has that makes that company, so that proprietary information, that very important thing that only that company can gather. Palantir's advantage is that they have the best way to ensure that that data never leaves the company, and also to process that data in let's say at a state of the art level that gets you the best answer possible. Is that a correct way of saying what you just said?
Absolutely. That's the correct way of saying it. And when you summarize it like that, in all honesty, it's like, why the fuck are we investing? This is so boring, right? When you compare it to Tesla or Apple, like it's just like, what the fuck is what? Really? This guy is building content around this? And it's like, this is where it's hard to get Palantir, because if you go so deeper into it, let me give you one example. The NHS, the United Kingdom, has 70 million people on their healthcare system. They have a nationalized, socialized system. It's not private. it's been horrible. And this is what my UK subscribers tell me over the past 20 years. Like, it's just like the wait times, the backlogs. You know, in America, you call up someone, you have your insurance, you get through it, it's done. In the NHS, it's all socialized. So there is no private doctor. Doctors make $56,000 a year. So it's very complicated. Palantir's in the bidding to win a $611 million contract to completely overhaul the entire NHS's digital backend architecture and build them a new federated data platform. And more likely than not, we're going to get this contract. And so those are the types of deals where you're like, okay, so an entire country's healthcare system is going to be managed by one company. I don't see Google doing that. You know, I don't see Snowflake doing that. Like, these are the unique things when it comes to, well, why are they picking Palantir? What is Palantir offering that's so unique? How is this working? Then you take it to another level. Ukraine. Palantir builds governmental software in the context of targeting, and it's called Gotham, which allows basically governments to be mission critical, ready for the battlefield. And Palantir software was the first software that Ukraine used. It's well documented at this point to stay alive against Russia. And so you've got two different areas. You got healthcare, where they're managing, 70 million people's healthcare in the United Kingdom, and then you got Ukraine, a country that's trying to maintain its sovereignty and using their software as basically a tactical nuke because they don't have any nukes of their own. And then you talk about what they're doing with BP. And so there's so many little internal intricacies of what Palantir is actually doing with data processing that makes, finding patterns in the data and being able to make decisions off of it. It doesn't sound as boring when you look into the use cases of it. It actually sounds super exciting in the age of AI and LLMs. And then you're like, is there a bull case for the stock that you can justify? And if there is, it might be an exciting company over the next 10 years.
So here's what I'm hearing. So my background is business intelligence. So before this YouTube thing happened randomly at Tesla, I was essentially I was brought in because I knew how to process data and create tools and dashboards and actions for an organization to take, as well as dig into it and get to work with the people so we can diagnose what's going on. Then before that, I was a director of BI at a $1 billion company. So like, data is something that I'm very comfortable around. So what I'm hearing,
and you have a degree in math and statistics, right?
Yeah, sure. I'm a huge nerd. Thanks for bringing that up, bro.
I stalk you. I know.
So here's what I'm hearing. So when I think about the NHS, when I think about how they're processing the data that they have, to me, I don't think Palantir, just from the research I've done, what I'm hearing, how you action the data to me is very much dependent in this day and age by the quality of analyst you have. I think the quality of analyst you have can go from rock star, can do literally 100 times better work, more work than the average analyst, to just a giant liability to your company and your organization, because that person's just creating dog shit data and dog shit analytics from that data, right? So, and apologies for that verbiage, but it's very much accurate. And I know this because I lived it, and I was that for a little bit of time before I learned how to do it properly. So, so from that perspective, as I'm hearing you talk, I don't think Palantir is necessarily that special when it comes to that. It might give people a little bit better tool sets to do that. Maybe the way the data is built out and all the schemas that are there, and maybe it will standardize a lot of dimensions and values for you and do a bunch of complex stuff that usually an analyst will have to sit down and do. Great, you can do that, but you can do that today with an excellent analyst. What I'm hearing is really the value proposition for Palantir is data protection and the ability for that software suite to be trusted by world governments. And so if Palantir is actually going out there, a majority of their revenue, I believe, is from government contracts, correct? Today, yep. I think with the US government and a bunch of other places. So to me, it sounds like what Palantir excels at, and the reason why they've been able to reach where they are, is because governments, institutions, corporations that value data privacy as, I guess, at the highest rank of what they're looking for in a solution, Palantir seems to be doing the best in those categories. And so long term, as AI comes through and it becomes easier to hack stuff, it becomes easier to infiltrate things. When we get into the age of, like, we're not fighting with weapons and guns and tanks anymore, we're fighting with artificial intelligence. This sort of wall that is Palantir against those attacks, to me, sounds like what they're really working towards and offering. What do you think about that, sort of how I'm thinking about the company?
I would agree that they are a defense contractor with a significant government moat. They just got $110 million from the Space Force last month in 3 contracts last week. And those contracts were sole sourced versus single sourced, which means sole sourced means there was no competition or bidding for the contracts because it was just them going for it. So I agree. Government's a major moat. And data privacy is incredibly important to the government. However, the research that I've done, the due diligence that I've done, which is it's a concern I had in 2021 because I was like, well, they're just making money from the government, the DoD. That's exciting, but like, why is there a massive multiple on it? Is when you look at what they're doing with commercial enterprises right now, the problem with Palantir is they suck at sales, they suck at their go-to-market. And maybe that'll change by Q2, Q3. Alex Karp, the CEO, just said in the recent conference, we are getting a year's worth of demand in 1 month in terms of inbound. Either he's lying or he's correct, and the numbers are going to prove if he's lying or if he's right in terms of how much inbound they're getting. But valuing it only as a defense contractor in the context of data privacy and all that stuff, I think would be an inaccurate way of understanding what they're doing in commercial. There's an article that came out that I'll send you after this as well, or I'll just put it in the chat, that CNBC did. It's like a 20-minute article on Palantir's hospital operations and what they're doing in hospitals. People don't know this, but Palantir powers 13% of beds in the United States, of hospital beds. And this stat came out a couple weeks ago at their latest conference. And I was like, so 13% of beds, let's say there's 100 million beds in America, hospital beds, 13 million of them are powered by some type of software that Palantir controls. Palantir was the main operating system for vaccine distribution back in COVID during the pandemic. And whether you agree on vaccines or not, the point is, they were there when countries decided that this is what they wanted to do, and Palantir software is the only thing available. So to me, when I look at those use cases, and then when I look at what they're doing with Tyson Foods, the people that make the chicken, they saved them $200 million last year. I'm just like, I don't know if it's just data privacy. I don't know if it's just business intelligence. I think there's something a little bit deeper in terms of the technology that is creating truly transformational results for these commercial enterprises. And then the business side of me as a stock picker is like, do I think this could scale to a couple thousand clients over the next decade? And if I think it can, then the multiple along with the AI market we're going into, this should be able to become a $200-300 billion company, similar to something like Salesforce, which is now at $250 billion over the past 17 years. And if that's the case, it's a nice 10-15x from here.